The cast aluminum base that it goes in, those are dog-ear handles, a lot like on a ship when you go into the heavy storm running. Navy ships, we used to batten down the hatches, and the same thing. So we open those handles, we adjust how the base sits, like that, and we dog-ear them closed, and that sets then in a wood cribbing stack, and that's how we start the elevation process. Actually, the jack mates right up to the beam. We set multiple jacks in these cribbing stacks at strategic points underneath the house, and we unify them all, and you push one lever and all of them go simultaneously at the same time, at the same rate. And that's the gentle effect that he was talking about. Let's talk about our equipment. This is really, this is it. This is the 1950s. These were the first machines ever made. Our industry was tasked with moving thousands of homes out of the way of the interstates. In the 50s, President Eisenhower said we got to have highways paved all across our nation. They moved thousands of homes out of the way. Unlike today where we just destroy homes with the machinery, back then we had no cable, low cables on the telephone poles, and we moved thousands of structures, but it was too cumbersome to just do the bottle jacks underneath the houses. So we designed some equipment, the industry did, with some hydraulics folks out of Chicago. Unfortunately, this business went out of business a year before Sandy. Bad timing on business. But this is our modern machinery. This machine costs around $100,000. The other one did not cost $100,000. These are the various channels that run the hydraulic and monitor the pressure. And then there's a lever that we've set all the jacks for the weight that they're going to carry, whether it's a chimney or a brick facade or a stone house or a cinder block house or whatever it is. We set the pressures to lift. We flip the levers on all the channels, and one lever pushes and the house goes up or down. We also have hoses, thousands of PSI hoses. Those jacks run about $3,500 a piece. By the time we're completely rigged to come to your house in a couple of fifth-wheel trailers with the track machine and everything else, we've invested close to $250,000 to show them to your house. We carry a lot of insurance, and it's a highly skilled, highly technical form of construction. Remember, we are the industry that moved the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, the Newark Airport Terminal, 6,000-ton solid masonry structure. Now we're going to go through the steps to elevation. This is a crawl space. A lot of those out on the landscape with the crawl space underneath. We open up the foundation at a predetermined frequency for the steel beams. We then, called snouting the beams, we insert the beams under the structure. Right there. We dig these crib beds, we call them bedding the cribs. We dig them into the soil and level them. Everything has to be level from the get-go, and then the towers are level as we build the towers up as the structure goes up. And here it is elevated. Very unique challenge in this house. Would have never made it with independently controlled jacks. There's a cinder block firewall that went all the way up to the roof of this place. It's a duplex. And so we're able to put 6 jacks on either side and ran the thing up perfectly with this much space between the floor system and that cinder block wall on either side. Nothing was attached to the cinder block, which was great because we would have had to unattach it. But the thing went up beautifully. It's sitting on an 8-foot-high foundation now. And it's in the very back bay behind Atlantic City. A lot of frequent water, twice a month, usually with the full moon. And she is up and safe. Single woman, rental on the other side, and she couldn't be happier. She's done the whole project herself with her ICC money, because she was substantially damaged. So all she had was her $30,000 and a wonderful employer who's helped her out. Here we go with a split level. Another really common 70s, 80s, late 60s design. And this design, you can't see it right here, but there is a crawl space. This is all a brick stone facade. We're able to, we have to take this facade off. It won't lift with the house, and they go back with a siding similar to this. But we're able to insert the beams here, but this is on a slab. And so we literally have to separate this part of the structure from the slab foundation. When it's up and elevated, they put a wood floor system under this part of it. This becomes an enclosed space, and they had a garage placed underneath the structure. Again, about an 8-foot-high foundation. one thing we always counsel people is the flood maps have the minimum elevation required. 100 years, your chance of getting flooded at the 100-year flood level is a percentage. The higher you go above that minimum level, the more discount you get. So we always tell people, if you're already up on our steel, 1 more or 2 more courses a block is nothing. We'll just take you up there and you do the extra courses a block. And flood maps will change again more frequently because now they're all digitized. We were living, just like in the Gulf Coast, we were living under what we call dinosaur maps from the 80s, very imprecise measurements of ground elevation. Now it's all satellite and LiDAR and computers, and those flood maps will be changing more frequently into the future. So here's the crawl space side. As it's elevating, you see the blocks being supported. This jack is at full stroke, and so now they'll place the corresponding blocks across here and there. We will move the jack up from where it's sitting right now to right here and lift again. So it's a series of lifts to get your structure to the elevation that we need. And here she is up. And I use a female term, I hope that's okay, because Navy background and ships. The way we do this, and we'll show you on the next house specifically, is we have to have all of the stud walls exposed for the slab elevation, and we bolt these 2x10s all the way around the inside of the structure and lift underneath those, as opposed to coming in under the floor system and lifting the floor system. We elevate on the load-bearing walls. So here's a slab separation. This was where we met Vince and started together for the first time. Very unique situation, and masterfully done.
21 days.
Yeah, 21 days from lift to foundation set.
Lift to foundation set. It's a world record, at least in my mind.
Well, and ours too. It's wonderful. We love working with Vince. The sooner we get it back on the foundation, the sooner we get our steel to go help another family. Very difficult. They had poured an additional slab inside the house to get an even slab because it had several additions. And the 2x4s were actually buried in the slab. So we actually had to cut them off to get the lift. Normally we don't encounter that. We just take the wall and it goes up. Here we had to cut every stud. So we had to essentially, in the end, before it was set back down on the structure, with the new floor system, we had to put a new plate on the bottom and make sure all the studs are equal. This is the rigging that we do within the structure. And basically this beam is underneath a 2x10 over here. This one is underneath some support over there, and the next slide will show you even more. We had that thing up, and within 2 days the masons were doweling the rebar in and setting corners. And there's Vince's better side. Remember those days, Vince? 70, 80, 90 degrees? Wow. So here's the banding. Here's that 2x10 with the steel beams inside, and we're lifting this. This is a very interesting house, very architectural treatments, or a lot of architectural treatment. There was a glass side handrail up this entire staircase. Not a problem. No cracks. Oops, sorry, missed it. There it is up from the back. It's on a lagoon on a corner, so you got a waterway there and a waterway here, a pool right there. A lot of issues with space and trying to maneuver and make sure that everything was okay and treated gently. And the shower, or the gate, still was able to stay because it wasn't attached to the house. We did remove the sliders, sliding glass doors, just so we had the access to put the banding across and the steel beams through. And you can see the corners and the first course already going up days after. And there she is, about 90% finished. Beautiful. They finished. They have color-coded the stucco now, and a couple of other treatments, a couple of lights, exterior lights. But that was 90+% finished. Lovely. And a whole new approach. Instead of being down on the ground at the pool deck level, they had an observational level, and no flooding in the future. So I'm going to give you some quick tips on selection of a professional qualified elevation contractor. This is really important. In the Gulf, there's not a lot of contractor requirements for elevation contractors in New Jersey. I'll just start with that. The homeowner improvement contractor registration requires only a $500,000 liability, no extra insurance for the actual structure when it's up in the air, And we're trying to fix that right now with some legislation in the New Jersey legislature, just because there hasn't been that much of it done here, and they really didn't understand this part of it. But let me go through it real quick. Got to have a contractor registration, minimum. Minimum of New Jersey contractor registration. Proof of liability. Most of our professionals carry $1 million instead of $500,000 for liability. That's a recommended level. There's no requirement at the state level to prove workman's compensation. We recommend that you get a certificate of insurance from the contractors you're doing work with so that you can see what insurance they carry. That's a normal request. And this is the biggie. Once you are up off of your foundation, as soon as that foundation and the house separate, homeowner's insurance does not cover the job, and neither does liability of the contractor. Only rigger's insurance will do that, because you're literally a cargo on our steel for the time that it's off of a foundation. So it's really critical. The accidents that have happened in this state, they did not have this insurance, and those homeowners were out of luck on recovering any monies for the loss of their structures. Which unfortunately we've had a couple of startup companies that didn't have the experience, and a couple of structures have been lost. Do they use this unified jacking machine? We still have a lot of people out there that are using the bottle jacks. Imagine saying 1, 2, 3, go, and 6 people under your house try and get the same elevation, and it goes like this. Houses flex, and sheetrock cracks, and windows can crack, and that's the old style. That's the way we did it before hydraulics, and it's really rugged on a structure. And so we really want you to double check that they have. There's lots of these out there, and we have 3 beautiful machines that we run a lot. How many years of experience using the machinery? That's key. Our guys have lifted probably close to 1,000 structures. They have 30, 40 years of experience. We've brought them in. That experience doesn't exist very much in the state. There's a couple of companies that were here for a whole generation or two, but not that many. And so we're using folks that have had this experience. They're working on new equipment, which is really wonderful. Equipment, a good investment by the company, and it'll give us many years of service and many houses raised safely. So basically that's it. Our industry is here to help you build back safer and stronger, and thank you for the opportunity to show you some of the processes that we used. And if you have any questions, we'll entertain those at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep, and at the end, I'm going to try, okay, good, it's 6:45. We try and do this thing in an hour and a half so that there's plenty of time afterwards for questions. But if you have a question, call it out to anyone here, but later we can actually sit down and go into detail. A couple of things that I want to stress before we go into the next speaker. The single most important thing that you should consider when raising your house is to elevate to base flood +3. You should write that down. It's the single most important thing that you should consider, because your flood insurance is significantly less. That is a major point, and the reason I'm mentioning that point is the REM program pays for base flood +1. That's the state minimum. So you're getting whatever you're doing, they will pay for that. They will pay for stairs to your base flood level +1. They will pay for elevation. They will pay for a foundation to that level. If you look in the handout that I gave you, there is a chart that shows the difference in flood insurance cost between base flood +1 and base flood +3. And what I'm saying to you is, at base flood +1, if you're paying $1,000, I'm sorry, at base flood +3, if you're paying $1,000 a year, base flood +1, you might be paying $3,500 a year. That is a material, significant difference. That could be $2,500 or $3,000 a year differential. Now, why is this important? Because it's really the only thing you can't do after the job is done. You don't go back in and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to lift my house another 2 feet. That doesn't happen. You can go back and say, you know, I'm going to change the deck. I don't want treated lumber, or, you know, I'm going to redo the floor. You can do anything else, but you can't change the elevation of your house. And in about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I did a specific cost comparison for flood insurance rates. It's important enough. So what does it cost to go an extra couple of courses of block? If you're going 2 extra feet, that's 3 more courses of block. Each course of block is 8 inches. What does that cost? I just did that today for an 1,800 square foot house that we're lifting in the Silverton section of Toms River. And it's about $6,600 that we're charging to go up 3 more courses. That's to give you an idea. They're saving that money that they're paying in about 2.5 years of flood insurance. Okay, so enough said on that. If you don't take anything else from this tonight, other than that point, that one point is a very important point. Okay, base flood plus 3 versus base flood plus 1. Yeah, what Rod said about the in New Jersey, you need to get a home improvement contractor's license if you want to build a deck, and you need the same license if you want to lift the house. Now, I think so. I can remodel your whole house with the same license, and Rod can lift your house. Rod and Andrew can lift your house, and the guy who's building your 10 by 16 deck, everybody's got the same license. Obviously, there's something wrong with that theory, and we're trying to get that changed at the state level, specifically for house lifting. Okay, real quick, and then we'll have someone else come up here and yap away other than me. Let's talk about money. Everybody understand ICC? Okay, good. ICC is a rider under your federal flood insurance policy. It is not a grant. You are entitled to it. If you had flood insurance when Sandy happened, you call up your insurance agent, you say, hi, I'm going to make, okay, if you didn't have flood insurance, you're out of luck, but if you had flood insurance, you call up and say, listen, I'm going to elevate my house so I can comply with the new codes, increased cost of compliance, ICC, that's what it stands for, and you say to them, send me the forms. There's no, do I qualify for this? It's not like that. You get it. You claim it. You pick up the phone, they send you the forms, you send them a contractor, an estimate from a contractor, and say, look, here's my estimate, and once again, REM and your insurance company, they're paying for the minimum. So if you say, listen, I'm making an ICC claim, and I'm lifting the house with HMGP under REM, they're paying for base flood plus 1. They want to see an estimate for base flood plus 1, foundation systems to that level, stairs to that level, and we give you an estimate. What you do after that, you can choose to do whatever you want. You can add the extra 2 feet, and you pay more for it. But ICC is something you're entitled to. So just let's get past that whole thing. Then, of course, there's the REM grant, whatever amount that you're going to grant. There is gap insurance over and above the $150,000 if your job is more costly. You can get an SBA loan as well. There are a number of different avenues to get money if you need it. Okay, lifting. Real quick on moving, on rehabbing versus demolishing and building new. If your house is, I know that your house is older. If your house is older than 30 years and it's not built to any of the codes, the current codes and standards, if it's on a slab, it's not worth lifting. If it's newer than that, if it has 2 stories, if the rest of the house is really nice and just the downstairs got damaged and it's on a crawl space, it's probably worth lifting. But if your house is on a slab and it's older than 85, chances are that it's not worth lifting. Because by the time you're done, and Ron touched on this a little bit, with the slab house, there's no floor system. That concrete slab is your floor. So when we lift that house, we lift the house away from the concrete. Concrete stays there. Now we have to lift the house, just like the one that you saw. We lift the house, we either demolish the foundation or we saw cut the foundation, and we do new footings and new block to the right level. Then we build a floor system on top of that. And then we fit the house back on the floor system. And by the time you're done with all this, For another $30,000, $40,000, you get a new house that's brand new, energy efficient, up to code. So just a thought, if anybody's sitting with a slab on, some houses, you're knocking them down. Some houses, it's obvious. But if you're trying to figure the cost benefit, you will save in energy efficiency sometimes in a few years what the extra that it will cost you to build a new house. Okay. Any questions, specific, general thoughts, comments? Anybody want a pretzel? All right. Okay, I'm going to have Evan come up and say a few words about engineering and in and out of the program. And Evan Hill from Dewberry.
Good evening. I want to thank Vince and for asking me to show up. Our firm has been in this business in New Jersey ever since the storm occurred. However, nationally, we've been involved down in Louisiana, Texas, up and down the coast over the last 25, 30 years in working on these kind of projects. In New Jersey alone, we've been involved with the REM program since early September. Back then, the program was, the REM managers themselves were handling all the engineering design work. Back around Thanksgiving, the state changed it to where the builders are, it's now a design-build contract. There's pros and cons to each. I think what we're seeing now in working with most of the builders are that the builders are bringing their experience, and the builders that they've teamed with are bringing their local experience, but they're also bringing the experience in the house lifting industry and so on. So I think the builders that are in the program are probably, or at least in my opinion, the cream of the crop. They're in the program for a reason. They know what they're doing. Okay. That's not to say there aren't builders, local builders, that couldn't do an equally as good job. But if it were my money, I wouldn't want to learn. I wouldn't want them learning on my dime. I want to draw on the experience that the builders in the program bring to the table. Now I'm going to say the same. I'm going to say the same thing about the engineering firms involved in the program. That's a little self-serving for me. But again, it comes down to experience of what can we offer and bring to the table. I want to touch on something Vince had brought up, or expand on something Vince had brought up. So the engineering, design, and permitting process, yes, it takes about half of the time of the entire process from start to finish. Half of the engineering, design, permitting, half of the engineering design time is permitting. Right? Time out of my control. I can't control it. That's with your local construction official. It's with your building department. It's with your zoning department, and so on. Depending on how difficult your project is, it's good to raise an extra as far as you can go, 3 feet. You may require a variance to do that. That's going to add time to your approval process. Okay? Not that you shouldn't do it. I'm all for it, but to manage people's expectations, there are decisions that are made up front that if you're not consulted with properly, it could impact your schedule. If you are raising a house, and especially if you're in a lagoon community, and your home's 30, 40 years old, you're likely on a crawl space with a shallow foundation system. Out of all the borings we've performed over the last year and a half in the lagoon communities, all of those homes to today's standards, and I'd argue that they should have been built differently, they should be on piles or a deep foundation system. Okay? One of the biggest costs and surprises to homeowners when they're going through this process is the part of the house that needs to be reconstructed that you don't even see below grade. And it's a rather significant cost. I would be leery of any engineer that comes in and tells you they can just, without adequately investigating, that they can just add block to your existing foundation to save you money. I wouldn't do it to my house. I wouldn't encourage anybody to their house either. Unfortunately, the part that costs the most for a foundation system is the part you don't see, but it will guarantee the lifetime of your home. As far as some of the other challenges you can encounter during the process, Survey is pretty straightforward. The geotech and foundation system is probably the biggest surprise to homeowners. There's not much else to my engineering expertise, is there? The zoning process itself, a lot of these towns are very overburdened right now with applications. Some of your smaller towns and boroughs, they have part-time staff, not full-time staff. Hopefully that changes as we get into the building season. But you should anticipate from the time a engineering set of plans is submitted for zoning, at least a month for them to turn it around. It takes me a month to put all the documents together. It takes them anywhere from, I would say, 2 to 4 weeks. I tell people 4 weeks because if they come in at 3, you tend to be happy, or happier. Once the zoning permits, and that's assuming you don't need any variances. So if you need variances because of height restrictions or because you're expanding your home in any way, if you need variances, you have to go through a public hearing process. You're going to add another 2 to 3 months on top of that minimum. So it's those upfront decisions when you assemble that team. Ask those questions. Just don't take for granted that your team has your best interests in mind, whether it's the people here or anybody else that you choose to talk to. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't always drill your consultants and your builders for the information. And if you don't understand it, or if you think you want to get a second opinion, by all means get a second opinion. Once your zoning permits are issued, you can then submit for construction permits. Again, that's about a 3-week turnaround time, maybe 4 weeks on average. So if it's an easy job and everything goes according to plan, from the time I'm told to start the survey work to the time that you get a building permit is 3 weeks, or I'm sorry, 3 months, quickest. It happens, 4 months happens, but 3 to 4 months. And I like to bring that up because that's important for you. If you're living in the home, you need to make arrangements after, when your contractor's ready to, after he pulls his building permits, you need to make arrangements to live somewhere else. So you also, you have to schedule accordingly. So I'm not going to, my part's probably the most boring part out of everything you're going to encounter. But again, I think we play a valuable role because we can help guide you to make good decisions. View us and the architects and the builders as a team and not people that are just working for you. I think we can bring a lot of experience and our experience to the table, and it helps streamline the process for you.
You said the geotechnical is the biggest surprise to the homeowner. Can you explain?
The foundation system.
Okay, meaning pilings,
Yes. Yeah, because if you're next to the water, or whether you have lagoons, I mean, if you really look back and and think back on how those lagoons were created, they were man-made. It was wetlands and marsh that somebody had the brilliant idea of cutting a bunch of waterways into, taking that fill, piling it behind bulkheads and putting homes on and roads. So your water table's only 2.5 feet below grade, but the fill what they put the fill on top of was the same marsh that they just dredged, right? And that's all organic material. That material is material that's not meant to be built on. It compresses with weight, it degrades, and it decomposes over time. So you don't want to put any additional load on that material or you're going to have problems with your foundation. So the alternative is you go through it. The industry standard is not to build on top of that material, it's to go through it with the foundation system. That's the industry standard.
more pilings or
Piles.
closer?
If you're doing a house elevation, there's a couple things that can be done. If you have enough room on your lot to physically move your home out of the way, you can drive wood pilings and put your house on top. I don't see that very often. The lots are too small to accommodate that. Although I've seen somebody, I don't know if it was one of your jobs, they cantilevered the home over the lagoon by about 15 feet. I was impressed. I wanted to take a picture. I took a picture of that. Yes. That's not the normal. The normal is you elevate your home up. They elevate the home. They remove the foundation system underneath. They install helical piles, which are metal screw piles that go into the ground and they're 5 foot lengths. To get through that material, they build a grade beam on top of it, which is like your spread footing, similar now. It's below grade. And they construct block up from it. So you still get that solid foundation.
In
That's the
in
norm.
general, how deep do they go?
It varies. I would say on average, you're looking at a minimum of about 15 to 20 feet and a maximum of about 35. It really depends on the geographic area of New Jersey. But for most of the lagoon communities in Toms River, Brick, this area, Little Egg, you're looking at about 25 to 35 feet.
Down.
Yes, that's the helicals.
What is that word?
It's called a helical pile, H-E-L-I-C-A-L. Helical.
Now, does the distance, it's a difference, if you use wooden pilings rather than helical, if you're rebuilding a new house?
If you're rebuilding a new house, the most economical solution is to use a timber pile. That's my choice.
Yes, do they go deeper with the timber,
No,
or more shallow?
They are about the same, because what you're looking for is you're looking for competent buried material underground. You have to transfer all the loads of your structure down through smaller section material that's coming through, right? So part of the pile is acting as end bearing, it's transferring its loads down to the tip, and a portion of the pile is actually acting as friction also. Timber seems to be the most economical way to go when you don't have obstructions, such as a house above it.
Timber is about a third the cost of a helical. So that's a significant aspect of the foundation. However, helical piles, you can generally use less of them, somewhere between 60 and 75 or 80% of the number that you would use with a timber pile. It's
It has a lot to do with the height of your home too, because the higher you go up, and I don't want to bore you with engineering because it bores me too. But the higher you go up, the more lateral loads you have with your wind pressure, so sometimes you might have to add some. So even though you might be going an extra 2 or 3 feet higher in block, and if it's a helical design, you may have to put a few more helical piles in. Helical piles are about $1,200 a piece on average, right?
Yeah, and timber piles are anywhere between $3 and $450 or $500.
Yeah.
Depending on how deep you're going. Our average pile in timber is going 15 to 20 feet to a compacted strength of 12 tons. That's pretty much sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 10, but that's generally what it amounts to. And helical piles they're 3 times as much. So it's something to consider. And the calculus or the matrix, the decision matrix is this. Is it less expensive overall to move the house, even if it has to be moved twice, than it is to lift it directly up and install helical piles? So it's really not just saying, wow, helical piles are really expensive. I've written a lot about them in the blog, and the house has got to be worth it to lift up and install helical pilings because the system is expensive. The foundation system is expensive.
It's probably your most expensive alternative in the program, but it certainly has its place and need.
Absolutely.
We did an analysis for a builder last week where we did have enough room to physically move the house off the lot and dry piles. But once we got the figure back, and it was for this specific house, once we got the dollar value back for what it cost to physically move the house and then move it again to put on top of timber, it was almost a wash.
Yep.
Right? It was literally almost a wash. So then it came down to the homeowner's decision was, and this would be my thought process, it's one thing, look, it's somewhat traumatic enough to see your house go up, which is kind of cool, but I think, we've never seen this before with our house. But to have it moved 50 feet twice, or 100 feet total, 50 feet one way, 50 feet another, to save $7,000 on a foundation system, I'd rather put the money in materials than the laborer cost to move things back and forth on my lot. That's my thought process, right? So a good builder can step you through those alternatives. We as engineers have gone through a lot of these alternatives already with the builders, and I like to say we tend to come up with a cost-effective design right off the bat. Not to say that it doesn't always need tweaking sometimes. But if it's laughs.
Anyway, thank you, Evan. I appreciate it.
I think one question
Go
will
ahead.
be done.
You are working with the REM program?
Yes.
How many other engineering firms are with the REM program?
Boy, that's
Is that a loaded question?
It's not loaded, I don't know the answer to
Are
that.
they all as good as you appear to be?
Absolutely not.
Do you know
We-
how
we
much I
started-
pay her? This lady's wonderful.
I would say like anything in life, do your due diligence. Yeah, if you have to do your due diligence so you know what questions to ask whoever gets hired to do your job.
They don't give you a choice.
If you're Pathway C, you mean, Pathway C, you're assigned a bill.
What about if you're pathway bid?
Pathway B, you get to choose your entire team.
You do?
Pathway B.
Oh.
But you also have to manage that entire team rather than the state managing it for you. And in Pathway B, my bills, your architect's bills, you have to pay for them out of pocket or out of your grant money. If you're in Pathway C, the state pays, you don't see an invoice from the engineers or architects if you're Pathway C. Our bills go directly to the state. So they're trying to, their purpose for that, their reason is to, when the state came up with this program, they wanted as many people in Pathway C as possible because it was less risk for them, because they ultimately have to report back to HUD. At the end of the day, they have to prove to HUD that everything was done in accordance with their standards. And it wouldn't be, if something wasn't done in accordance with HUD standards, HUD would hold money back. And if you project that out, I wouldn't put it against our great government here to say, oh, you didn't follow the rules, you go get that money now. So there's trade-offs to everything. You have more flexibility in something, but then again, the people that are managing that program have the experience behind the do. I would say if you're a,
That's not true.
what's that?
That's not really.
Oh, no, I don't mean the REM, I don't mean all the REM managers. No, that's not what I meant. I mean the team that's put in place.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
Is put in place, in the state's eyes, it's put in place because the experience is brought to the table, so the state doesn't have to worry about funds being, reimbursement of funds from the federal government being jeopardized. That's why it costs a little bit more in Pathway, or more in Pathway C. That's why it takes a little bit longer, because there's less risk on the state to go Pathway C.
And there are more people involved.
And
And more people are getting paid.
And the other thing is
Not
there's
paid
standards
off.
too.
It's not paid in a bad way,
Right.
but there are more people that are being paid under Pathway C because there are just more people looking at the work.
And the other thing we're seeing as professionals is, because, look, I
They're
have a lot of
doing-
I have a lot of friends
They're not
that are
doing
in the-
anything, they're looking.
I have a lot of friends that are in the business, they're local, some of them have their own little engineering firms, 1 or 2 management shops. They can do the work, but there's a learning, with this is new, there's a learning curve to this, all right? 12 months ago, it was somewhat of a learning curve, some of this was learning curves for us. But you need, the depth and the, you can't replace the depth and experience, you have to put a dollar value on that something, all across the people in the
Okay.
I shouldn't ask all these questions, but, how can they determine what they're gonna award to you, before all of this?
Good question.
You know
Yeah,
something
well,
else?
it's given?
I'm gonna let Vince
No, no,
address this,
I-
he spent
I know,
lots
but
of
that's-
money.
I gotta take that one.
Yeah.
That's a great question. How can you determine what a foundation system is gonna cost before you know what the foundation system is?
Yes,
That's an outstanding question. And the answer is, you can't.
so if they say to you, we will give you X number of dollars, come in for the signing, and they haven't done that,
Okay, now, with Pathway C, there is a design stage, which moves into a construction stage. With Pathway C, you sign your grant documents, and then you start in design. There's a preliminary estimate that your contractor gives to your program manager, to REM. That estimate is subject to change once the design work is all done. So I do an estimate and I say, I'm going to take out your existing foundation. I'm going to lift your house up, say we're going up 4 feet. So I'm going to lift your house up 6 feet. I'm going to take out your existing footing and foundation completely, and I'm going to put a new footing and foundation, and then I'm going to lower the house down. So then I go to Evan and I say, listen, I need I need a design package, and he says, okay, he does it, he gets the soil boring report back, and he says to me, you can't use a concrete foundation on this house. You need to put a piling foundation of some type. In Pathway C, the construction manager comes back to me and says, listen, you spec this for a concrete foundation. You can't build a concrete foundation because the soils won't bear. So give us another price for a either helical or timber pile foundation. And then another estimate is done and the numbers change. That's Pathway C. In Pathway B, what we do, because it's the real world, and I'm sitting here saying to you, okay, I'm guaranteeing this, before we really even do anything, I'll give you an estimate and I'll say, listen, this estimate is based on a concrete foundation. This estimate is based on your soil engineering and your soil borings coming back and having the ability for me to pour a concrete footing and block up a crawl space. If it does not come back like that, then I have to remove that from the bid, and then I have to give you a new price based on pilings of some type. That's what really happens. But, and this is why I've been banging on this in the blog, and I brought it up before, and it's such a good point. It's so important. You have to do geotechnical analysis or soil boring, or else you have nothing. You have no idea. Nothing is worth anything. There's no, how many times I've called Scott and said, I have another client. He's like, did you do the soil boring yet? I'm like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. We did one right down the street. So do the soil boring first and then talk to me so I could design a foundation. And it's true. So if you start, once you have that one thing, just that, not everything else, just the soil boring and the geotechnical report, then you can actually speak intelligently. Now, do we do preliminary estimates for people prior to when design work is done? We do them all the time. Some people don't do them. I do them because clients ask me for them. And they say, listen, can you give me this based on this? If I'm doing a house on the next block over in a lagoon community like Beach Haven West, let's say, well, unfortunately, what Evan said is true. All of those lagoons were cut, and all of the dirt behind the bulkhead is dredge spoils. It's all garbage. It's all organic. There's no bearing. It's all crap. And what they did is God bless you, they pile it up, and it's 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 feet deep. And then they built these foundations on it for these little houses. And then people came and built bigger houses. And now we're raising these bigger houses, and you have to get through that garbage in order to get bearing strength. But I can make an educated decision and an evaluation based on work we've done. If we've done work in the area that's similar, we can give you an estimate, and I can say, listen, this house is going to be this much money. This house is going to be $65,000 to do a raise if we can build a concrete footing and foundation. And you know what? If we need to do pilings, then it's going to be this much money. So the design stage really determines all this. You need that to tell you. Another thought about helicals versus timber piles and the whole thing. It comes down to, with a smaller house, once again, if it's on a slab, if it's not worth it, you can't practically put a $50,000 foundation under a house that's worth $50,000 or $60,000. That you can buy that house new for that much money. So it becomes a cost consideration that you have to think about. And another thought is, this isn't something that you want to try on your own. You don't want somebody to do this. Everybody in New Jersey has been learning this business, this elevation business, for the last year or so. You want somebody who's done this. You do want to speak to a professional team, an engineer, an architect, a builder, who have done these things, because there's a lot of complexity to them. So that was, and then another point about adding block to foundation systems. I just got off the phone with an architect today, client called me up and said, here's the plan, and we want you to add block to this house, and we want you to do the job, and Andrew sent me the lead from Baumgartner. He said, this client wants us, and we told them about you, and we went and saw them, and two lovely people, and they said, we have this plan, and we want to add block to the foundation. The house is 65 years old. I'm looking at it. Went out, did a site visit, talked to him, took a lot of pictures. Called the architect. I said, this house is partially on a crawl, partially on a slab. It's a partial slab separation. It's a little complicated. Are you comfortable with the condition of this slab? I mean, we're going to add block to this? Are you okay with this? And he says to me, yeah, I'm okay with it. You know, we're only going to add 6 courses of block. I said, well, did you do any evaluation of this foundation? Did you dig into the side? Did you do anything? He says, yeah, I actually did. And I did look at it and I calculated it. But I asked him for that information, for that work product, because at the end of the day, I got to make this house come together and I'm responsible for it. So it's rare that an existing house will support additional block unless it's already on pilings in a grade beam, unless it's younger than 30 years. Most of the time that foundation is coming out. And we're finding that over and over and over.
Okay, now what's the cost for a soil bearing?
For a soil bore, it
Yes.
varies. It's anywhere from about, again, it varies. You're probably looking at no more than $2,000.
And
No more.
that's, by the way,
No more
and
than
that's
200
driving-
starting?
That's driving, and so
that's
there's,
the whole thing though. You got to explain
Yeah,
that.
that's
See,
it.
it's not a soil boring alone. A
Right.
soil boring alone, right now, is between $600 and $800, $600 and $900.
that's for somebody to show up and give you a piece of paper that you don't know what to do with.
Right, right. So you have a guy come out with a drill rig, and he's going to drill 30 feet down, and he's going to do what's called a split spoon boring. And he's going to give you a piece of paper. It's going to show every foot. It's going to have numbers, and you're not going to know what to do with this. And I can look at it and say, all right, well, it looks okay, and it tells what kind of soils it is. The part that you're paying for that's important is the geotechnical analysis. That's the other $1,300, $1,400. That's the 15-page report where he's signing it, or Scott's signing it, and they're putting their license on the line saying, listen, I've evaluated this. We didn't just do a half an hour soil boring with one little 5x8 piece of paper. We evaluated every single lift, every single 6 inches, composition of soil, the porosity, the whole thing, the compaction level. So that's what you're paying for. So sometimes people say, oh, well, you know, I can get a soil boring. It's $650. Yeah, good. What are you going to do with it?
Well, the other thing is too, but if you're going to do that yourself, don't Google well drillers.
Right.
Don't expect them to give you a soil. If they do, don't pay them and tell them to leave your property. You're not looking for a well driller. You're looking for a drilling company that specializes in geotechnical. They're out there. Most of them, there are a couple companies who we'll call somewhat local to here that over the last 12 months have decided to get into the drilling business. I use that word loosely, drilling business. As a geotechnical engineer, I don't agree with the methods that they're using. But they're $400 or $500 to come out and drill a hole.
And it's not
You
any
get what
good.
you pay for at the end of the day.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything
You
for you.
ultimately get what you pay for, like anything.
If you have an engineer do a geotechnical analysis, he's sitting out there with little Ziploc bags,
Jars.
little mason jars, and he's collecting samples at each lift. He's taking them back to his office, and he's evaluating the soil. So, once again, it's a difference between having someone build a deck and having someone build a house. And I'll get to your question in 1 minute. You touched on communication, and communication is major. If you don't have someone who is going, this is not a drive-by business. Okay, this is not I Googled your house, I looked at it on Google Earth, I'll shoot you out an estimate. I've had people say to me, oh yeah, I got an estimate from this company out in Pennsylvania, I'm out there, and I'm sitting there with an estimate from Andrew or Rod, and I'm going, okay, I'm at the house, like crawling around in the crawl space and measuring stuff, looking at their fireplace and their 3 different floor systems and their 2 additions on their 60-year-old house, and I said, really, what, this company in Pennsylvania, they gave you this, and I have a bid of $35,000 to do a lift from Bone Gardner, and this company is $22,000. Did they ever come out? No, the guy just checked it on Google Earth, he looked me up, he sent me a thing, and he did my house, and it doesn't work like that. You're gonna spend, whatever you're gonna spend, 60, 70, 80, 100 grand, 150 grand to get this work done.